In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path to omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening. So we continue with our exploration of the texts distinguishing Dharma, suchness, and the intrinsic nature of phenomena, their suchness. Maitreya's Dharma Dharmatava Bhanga. And we were in the introduction by Karl Brunholzl to his version of this in the section on the importance of non-conceptual wisdom and his presentation of what non-conceptual wisdom is. And we circulated a revised version of that. Knowledge of the distinctive features. Okay. So we were on, in the new version. Does everybody have the new version? The easy to read version? Let's see. I'll put that up. Hold on one. So in this version, we're on page 6, but since we have this nice version, maybe we'll just recap very briefly. So the discussion of the fundamental change includes an explanation of non-conceptual wisdom, which is the key factor in the change, in the transformation. And this is one of two key texts that discusses this topic, non-conceptual wisdom as the key aspect of the fundamental change between sentient being and Buddha. The other one being the Mahayana Samgraha, the compendium of Mahayana, of the greater vehicle by a Sangha. And Karl has focused on that text also and presents that in a 3-volume set along with a number of commentaries. Someday would be great to go through that, because it's one of the key texts of the Mahayana, of the Yogacara, and the Mahayana in general. So the following presentation of non-conceptual wisdom is not exhaustive, but is limited to these two texts. In the Dharma Dharmatava Bhanga, non-conceptual wisdom has 4 objects, and it turns out these focal objects are more like, what are the steps in cultivating non-conceptual wisdom? Relying on the teachings, hearing the teachings, reading the teachings through spiritual friends who present those teachings, either in person or hybrid or online on Zoom or in books. Based on that, our aspiration for the Dharma taught by them arises for the Mahayana Dharma. As we study the Dharma, our aspiration for the Dharma increases as we understand, as it becomes more accessible, more immediate. understandable, followed by gaining doubt-free certainty about it through reasoning. So ideally, that leads to understanding, or rather studying or exploring the logics for the major aspects of the teachings. Why are phenomena empty in particular? Why, beginning with the fact of suffering and the cause of suffering, the Four Noble Truths, and then leading to the true nature of phenomena as being without intrinsic essence, and the importance of the cultivation of bodhicitta, relative and ultimate, and the stages involved in that. But the reasonings for how the true nature of phenomena is presented. And then we put that into practice, complete the accumulations by way of mentally engaging in a proper manner in the meaning about which one has gained certainty. He says mentally engaging. I guess that would not exclude physically and engaging, in the sense that the mental engagement needs to precede the physical, but it did seem a little odd to restrict it to mental engagement. And these are all factors required. Relinquishment of characteristics. So they didn't quite say that up here, that non-conceptual wisdom means the relinquishment of characteristics. But yes, non-conceptual wisdom means the relinquishment of conceptual mind, which operates through characteristics. And this refers specifically to four kinds of conceptions. Conceptions about factors that are antagonistic to understanding or experiencing the understanding the Dharma, or experiencing the fundamental change, the remedies for those, suchness and realization. The antagonist factors, antagonistic, what a weird word. The antagonistic factors consist of the afflictions in general and the fourfold clinging, which is to sentient beings as being impermanent, to what is empty and conditioned as being real, to samsara as being really existent, and to identityless phenomena as having an identity. So misunderstanding of the nature of emptiness, basically, which is the conclusion of the fact of the impermanence of all phenomena. The remedies consist of the antidotes, meditation on renunciation, uh, understanding or studying the conditioned nature of phenomena and how everything conditioned is impermanent. So this is applying the logics. Everything imaginary is empty, all beings of samsara not beyond the three sufferings, and nirvana is peace. And so this is the four marks or axioms of the Dharma in a slightly unusual framework. Everything imaginary as being empty is a little bit odd. The order, just the order, usually it's like impermanent, suffering, essenceless, and nirvana is peace. And it seems like this gloss at the end applies to the last one, but it's not conclusive. But it's interesting to think of it in that way. Nirvana is being peace, because all phenomena are identityless and free from being mine. And so that's peaceful. There's no possession. There's nothing to gain, nothing to lose, and no one to gain or lose. Those non-gainable, losable entities, non-entities. These are the remedies of samsara because they liberate from non-virtue. However, if one clings to those factors to be relinquished and their remedies as if they're real, one will not be liberated. So we have to understand that the skillful means of the path are skillful means, and they're not actually really real in themselves. They are skillful means that are appropriate for sentient beings in this world realm who are subjected to these characteristics. They are without arising and ceasing, they're unconditioned. This is the suchness of all phenomena, which is, in fact, the ultimate remedy of all remedies. And it is the focal object of non-conceptual wisdom. Interesting, first there were four, but really the main focal object for non-conceptual wisdom is suchness, the unconditioned nature of phenomena. And the only way for us to approach suchness is to relinquish characteristics about it. Interestingly, the characteristics of realization refers to conceptions about subject or suchness, that is, all realizations on the path, training and perfecting and the fruition. So everything revolves around understanding the ungraspability of the nature of phenomena, which is called suchness. And here's a little mapping of those to the five paths. The first two occur on the path, on the path of accumulation preparation. What am I doing? And the characteristic of suchness is understood on the first path and continues up until the end of the seventh, or the seventh bhumi, which is the seventh of the so-called impure bhumis. Impure only in that they're still subject to latent tendencies of cognitive obscurations. And then the characteristic of realization on the three pure bhumis, 8, 9, and 10. The yogic practice that accompanies this to attain non-conceptual wisdom is the four higher yogas, the four pra-yogas, observing phenomena as being nothing other than mere mind. And this is reminiscent of the fourfold pointing out of the Mahamudra tradition. Having understood all phenomena as being mere mind, not observing any phenomena as external objects. And in the Mahamudra system, this is sort of combined as one. And then not observing any observer of objects either, and finally observing the suchness, that is the unobservability of the duality of apprehender and apprehended, is sort of the third of the four pointing outs. The usual fourfold pointing out of the Mahamudra tradition is understand all dharmas are mind, understand that mind is empty, understand that emptiness is spontaneously or naturally present, and understand that spontaneous or natural presence to be self-liberated, not something that can be grasped conceptually. These four map to the second path of the path of accumulation, of preparation, which has four levels of heat, peak, poised readiness, often translated as patience, and the supreme dharma, the highest worldly dharma. It's the highest realm in the realm of desire, the realm of samsara. Actually, not just the realm of, not just the realm of desire, the first of the three realms, but the highest point of samsara before one leaves samsara by experiencing the path of seeing. So those four are mapped onto that second path, and non-conceptual wisdom is defined through three characteristics, even though it was beyond characteristics, resting in the very essence of the nature of phenomena, resting in it without appearances, and resting in it with appearances. These seem to be progressive as opposed to like simultaneous qualities. I'm curious what other people think. Non-conceptual wisdom abides or rests in the non-dual and inexpressible nature of phenomena as its focal object. We begin there. What does not appear for this wisdom are duality, designations, characteristics of all types, right? Resting in it without appearances. So by resting in the inexpressible nature, non-dual inexpressible nature of all phenomena, all the characteristics of phenomena no longer appear. And thereby non-conceptual wisdom is grasped, which is a funny word to use, but is experienced through through understanding the duality, um, the absence of duality of apprehender and apprehended. And then finally, the manner in which all phenomena appear for non-conceptual wisdom is that during meditative equipoise they appear equal to space, since non-conceptual wisdom lacks all characteristics of subject and characteristics. And then during subsequent attainment, outside of meditation, phenomena appear as the union of appearance and emptiness, like illusions and dreams and so on, which seems to be the culmination. And the first one seems to be like the path of preparation, the second one, the path of seeing, and then um, the third one, the path of familiarization. The fourfold benefit is pretty simple. Dharma is the kayas, the various ways that a Buddha manifests, the Dharmakaya, and then the other ones are not. The word kaya does not appear in them, but they seem to be like the Svabhavaka kaya, the Sambhoga kaya, and the Nirmanakaya, although it's a little bit unclear. The first two represent one's own welfare, which is usually the characterization of the Dharmakaya. Usually we say the two benefits. The benefit for oneself is the Dharmakaya. And so in the later texts of the Mahayana, the Dharmakaya is split into two aspects. The enlightened activity by virtue of being free of the two obscurations, and then the bliss beyond all forms of contaminated bliss due to having attained Buddha qualities. Seems to be a description of the two aspects or types of Dharmakaya that are talked about in texts such as the Uttara Tantra, also by Maitreya. And then the two kayas that are for the welfare of others are the Sambhoga kaya and their Nirmanakaya. It described in an unusual way here, but it seems that's what they probably are. Among the fourfold thorough knowledge, what is it that non-conceptual wisdom is wise about? What is that wisdom? Its knowledge is about being a remedy, refers to non-conceptual wisdom remedying the fivefold clinging to what is non-existent. Clinging to non-existent phenomena, clinging to non-existent persons is being referenced. Both of these as being reference and having an entity, clinging to non-existent change, clinging to a difference between phenomena and their nature while there is no difference, and clinging to the denial of taking phenomena and persons to be utterly non-existent. So these are like wrong views, 5 wrong views, and he explains that the first 4 clingings are superimpositions, where we're projecting onto reality what is not there through our conceptual mistake. And then the 5th one is where we're undercutting reality. We're being nihilistic and saying that things have absolutely no existence in any way, non-existence. So the term existent and non-existent is not used really as we normally use it in English, because existent phenomena are basically phenomena that are possible, and non-existent phenomena are phenomena that are not, existent phenomena are empty and appear and non-existent phenomena are not empty, and they don't ever appear. Nothing not empty ever appears. Thorough knowledge of the defining characteristics of that conceptual wisdom, just like a very long litany of different aspects of conceptual wisdom, many of which seem repetitive. Um, it's not the total absence of mental engagement. It's not just spacing out. Nor is conceptual wisdom the transcendence of concepts, in the sense of lacking any coarse or subtle conceptual analysis. So it's not dualistic in the sense of when there's non-conceptual wisdom present, there is no concepts. That is not the way of that's being presented here. That non-conceptual wisdom pervades conceptual mind. And the interesting conclusion is that although all mundane meditative states from the second dhyana of the formula onward are without analysis, they lack the qualities of non-conceptual wisdom. So non-conceptual wisdom does not automatically appear when there is no conceptuality. And this is demonstrated by saying, well, the absorption states from the second one onward are without conceptuality, and yet they are not, they lack non-conceptual wisdom. It's not the complete subsiding of concepts either. Otherwise, being asleep and so forth would be non-conceptual wisdom. Nor is it something like inert and unconscious matter which simply lacks conceptions by its very nature. And non-conceptual wisdom is also not the picturing of non-conceptual. It's not like sort of creating an image of non-conceptuality in our mind, and then we think that we're experiencing it. So the actual defining characteristics of non-conceptualization, of non-conceptual wisdom, is that which observes true reality. Unlike normal consciousness, that realization does not involve variety or multiplicity. Non-conceptuality means completely letting go of discursiveness and reference points, in particular with regard to the true nature of reality, such as trying to pinpoint a certain experience. Thinking, oh, this is it. This is non-conceptuality, which we all do. Like, oh, I had a gap. Is that non-conceptuality? But naturally, non-conceptual wisdom does not just mean a state of trying not to think or imagine anything. In some, it means not seeing anything to be observed, not apprehending anything as anything whatsoever. So things are beyond being apprehended or observed or not. This perceptual mode is actually the seeing of the suchness of all phenomena. From our perspective, non-conceptual wisdom cannot be demonstrated in an affirmative manner. Therefore, though its nature is not to conceive of anything, though through unerringly realizing that the nature of phenomena is unobservable as anything whatsoever, non-conceptual wisdom does not apprehend it as anything. So its nature is to not conceive of anything. Through realizing that the nature of phenomena is unobservable. However, this wisdom is not taught to be non-conceptual by virtue of not cognizing or by a total cessation. Therefore, non-conceptual wisdom does not have conceive of reference points in any way. And thereby within the sphere of the basic nature being unobservable, within that realization or stage or state where the basic nature is unobservable, the basic nature of phenomena is unobservable, the appearances of personally experienced wisdom dawn from within. It's an interesting statement. Let that sort of gestate or ferment inside you. The knowledge of the distinctive features of non-conceptual wisdoms of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, which is actually where we left off last time. Shravakas Parteka Buddhas conceive of samsara as a flaw and of nirvana as a quality. And so these are ways that non-conceptual wisdom is superior to these gentlemen or people. Their wisdoms are limited because they focus merely on the general characteristics of the four realities for noble ones, the four commonly known as the Four Noble Truths. They also abide somewhere because they abide in nirvana. That's a no-no. And their wisdoms are not lasting either because they become extinct in the nirvana without remainder. They experience cessation. Their nirvana is a cessation. And so their wisdom is, ends, it terminates, and they are surpassed by Buddhas. On the other hand, the wisdom of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is non-conceptual. It is beyond the concepts involved with samsara nirvana. It's unlimited. It takes as its objects all characteristics of all noble objects as they are. It's not limited. It's not abiding. It's a non-abiding nirvana, as it's called, and it's lasting because the Dharmakaya, as its foundation, is permanent. Therefore, its continuum does not even become extinct in the nirvana without remainder, and therefore always operates for the welfare of beings as long as samsara lasts. So the idea of bodhisattvas and Buddhas not actually disappearing into nirvana, but always being present for the welfare of others. It is unsurpassable. There's nothing more supreme than it. The knowledge of the fivefold function of this wisdom refers to its distancing itself from the movement of conceptions, because it has overcome the arising of latent tendencies of ignorance about suchness. So it doesn't affiliate, doesn't hang out with conceptual mind, even though it's present, doesn't engage with it. It accomplishes unsurpassable, unmistaken, and lasting bliss because of realizing the suchness and variety of all noble objects. This is the definition of omniscience, has these two wisdoms, understanding the suchness of all knowable objects, of all phenomena, and understanding their variety, their way of manifesting. It makes one attain the freedom from all afflictive and cognitive obscurations. It overcomes all contaminations, including their latent tendencies, and the wisdom that is attained subsequent to the non-conceptual wisdom during meditative equipoise engages unimpededly in all aspects of noble objects. So we're talking about the eighth bhumi onward, the pure stages where we've reconciled meditation and post-meditation. By virtue of the great fundamental change of all eight consciousnesses, non-conceptual wisdom purifies Buddha realms, mature sentient beings, and grants omniscience. In terms of their contents, points 7 and 8, mental engagement and training of the Dharma Dharmata of Vibhanga's presentation of the fundamental change. So, Carl is going through the 10 points about the fundamental change that are discussed, identified, and discussed in the text. And he says about points 7 and 8, which are mental engagement and training. This text, the DDV's presentation of the fundamental change, also pertain to non-conceptual wisdom. Those 2 points pertain to non-conceptual wisdom, engagement and training. DDVV, which is Vasubandhu's commentary on the Dharma Dharmata of Vibhanga called the Vritti, explicitly includes these 2 points under its discussion of non-conceptual wisdom, saying that point 7 belongs to the defining characteristics of non-conceptual wisdom, while point 8 elucidates the training that we undergo in order to attain it. In more detail, DDVV Masabaru's commentary explains the engagement in non-conceptual wisdom as follows. For ordinary beings, false imagination appears while actually not existing. This is a funny list. The mental engagement in non-conceptual wisdom as follows. For ordinary beings, false imagination appears, although not existing. Due to its seeming appearance, the actual existing nature of phenomena does not appear because we're confused by false imagination. However, once false imagination does not appear anymore due to having been recognized as what it is, i.e. unreal, the nature of phenomena appears naturally. So presumably this is the beginning stages of the path for that ordinary beings encounter in their pursuit of the cultivation of non-conceptual wisdom. And then bodhisattvas mentally engage in non-conceptual wisdom through the four yogic practices, which we saw earlier. By virtue of observing that false imagination appears but does not exist, they engage in observing everything as mere cognizance, mere mind. Because cognizance is the appearing of duality. Interesting. So cognizance, mentation, mind, cognition is the manifestation of duality. And we'll come to this in the text. This touches on a really interesting idea presented in this text that I've never actually encountered before, which is this idea of how mind only has two aspects. It has what this text called the shared situation of mind only, and the unshared or uncommon, common and uncommon. And it says that the mind that appears as the environment, the container, the location, the phenomena that we see around ourselves is the shared mind. We all share in this same mental projection. We're born into this realm over and over and over again, and we experience the same appearance of this realm as being a certain way. And the unshared is our own mental continuum and the latent tendencies that get accumulated and planted, and then in our Alaya Vijnana, our mental continuum, and then get triggered and come to fruition. By virtue of observing everything as mere cognizance, bodhisattvas engage in not observing any reference. So if we see everything as mere mind, we understand that, or we then have the ability to see that phenomena do not, the appearances that we experience do not point to some other object. We tend to think that the colors that our visual system sees indicate an object that possesses those colors. But instead here, through this path, we understand that those colors are all that exists of the appearance. And there's no other phenomena that those colors, in the case of visual consciousness, pertain to. It's not like there's a horse that's white. It's just there's white horse or white castle.
Did you get that from the Hopkins article about White Horse? I used an article that had that specific example that was from Hopkins in our Delig recently,
Cool.
And it had a really interesting impact on at least one person, kind of really it shifted their mind in terms of how they are, seeing appearances.
That's great. That's cool. Yeah. No, I don't think I've read that article. Please share that with us.
I will.
I've encountered this in other places, like a debate in Tibetan Buddhism by
I guess
Purdue.
it's a classic one,
It is, yeah,
just like the vases and all that. Okay.
yeah,
It was just because you said white. I just thought, okay, that's either it's the same article or it's a common
yeah.
one
The
from
white
it.
horse is not white.
Right,
It has whiteness,
right.
something like
Great.
that.
Very good.
Yeah. Therefore, external reference don't exist by virtue of not observing any reference. They engage in not observing mere cognizance either, because it is not established as this very cognizance. If if appearances appear without any sort of uh, foundation for their appearance or foundation, then the observation of them has no uh, foundation. The observation of them has no foundation. If there are no reference to be cognized, cognizance is not reasonable. If there's no objects, then the perceiving of objects doesn't make any sense. By virtue of not observing this cognizance, that is, by virtue of not observing apprehender and apprehended, they engage in observing the lack of difference between those two. For apprehender and apprehended are not different, since they do not exist as two in the first place. Thus, the very non-observation of apprehended and apprehended is the observation of the lack of difference between these two, because the difference can only be cognized if there are two distinct phenomena. The tendency is to think that we have an error in the way that we perceive phenomena, but that phenomena are truly there. And in this tradition, the idea is that uh, because phenomena are not truly there, our experience of them is erroneous, and because our experience of them is erroneous, then our experience is not genuine or real. Thus, the manner of mental engagement on the path of preparation resulting in the path of seeing. This is. Thus, the eventual non-observation of apprehend or apprehended, that is, the observation of non-dual suchness, represents non-conceptual wisdom. This non-conceptual wisdom lacks any external or internal objects, as in the case of the eyes, and so on. It is also free from being a subject that observes any objects, because it is characterized by not observing any characteristics whatsoever. It's characterized by not observing any characteristics. Finally, the entire progression of the train in order to attain non-conceptual wisdom consists of the five paths. A little bit of an odd ending there. The entire finally, so the path of cultivating non-conceptual wisdom consists of the five paths, just to sort of sum up, I guess. So, momentous moment here, finally,
The
shifting to
drum
the
roll.
actual text. Yeah, the drum roll, please. So, diving into the text, distinguishing phenomena from their intrinsic nature. And tonight we had the foreword by Chukinima Rimshe, which appears right after the table of contents on Roman numeral, 7. The protector Maitreya, Lord of the Dharma and regent of the victorious one. So he's the next Buddha, so he's the successor or the regent of the Buddha, the victorious one, teaches with a flawless voice. So teaches without mistakes, or without anything being unclear or left out, nor overemphasized or incorrectly characterized. The way to distinguish phenomena from their intrinsic nature. What a joy that this wish-fulfilling jewel is here today and remains for the future. His excellent statements genuinely resolve the entire treasury of profound and vast Dharma. Their able translation appearance in English is excellent fortune for sentient beings. So that's his forward. Let's see, in the introduction, we can just skim and touch on a couple of things. Oh, darn. Let's see. He tells the story of Asanga. According to legend, on page Roman numeral 10, Asanga was born in northwestern India, present-day Pakistan, and practiced as a monk in one of the lineages associated with the so-called lesser vehicle. After converting to the Mahayana, he became inspired to spend a period of time in strict retreat and decided to focus on a form of devotional practice directed toward the future Buddha Maitreya. So we've heard this story over and over again. Interesting parts about it. One is that the location in northwest India, I had not really registered that, and northwest India was in communication with what is it called, Eurasia, in the Middle East, and the southern or southeastern Europe, i.e. Greece and Macedonia and the countries in between, where Zoroastrianism was big, and there's conjecture that Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, was actually influenced by Zoroastrianism or traditions associated with that in terms of how we look at and look towards uh, bodhisattvas, the so-called what are they called? The great bodhisattvas, the mahasattvas, the big ones, are Avalokiteshvara, Maitreya, Vajrapani, and Maitreya as sort of creating a pantheon. Let's see. Um, the story of his retreat and his reaction when I wish they would change this part where his immediate reaction is he's mad at Maitreya for not appearing for 12 years. You would think after 12 years that he had a little humility and humbleness and would think, well, maybe I had something to do with his non-appearing. But he blames Maitreya. And then, so on page 11 in the middle, the third paragraph at the end, it says, with this, the Sangha finally understood that Maitreya's lack of compassion was not to blame, but rather that it was the obscurations in his own mind that had clouded his perception from being able to perceive Maitreya. I don't know why they have to enter in blame here to the legend. It's obviously a legend. Anyway, Maitreya takes him to Tushita heaven in an instant, and there they hang out for uh, what some texts say for like 50 years of and but then he returns to Earth, and it's like a finger snap of time had elapsed since he left this realm. But he spent like 50 years there studying and practicing with Maitreya in the time frame of that world. And the result is these 5 teachings of Maitreya and then Asanga's brilliant works, commenting on them and expanding on them, which indeed are quite amazing texts. Let's see. This text, distinguishing phenomena, their intrinsic nature, and their commentaries on page Roman numeral 12. The main focus is to clearly delineate the phenomena that comprise our ordinary enlightened existence and the intrinsic nature or dharmata of these very same phenomena, i.e. nirvana. So samsara and nirvana here are called phenomena and their intrinsic essence or dharmata. In cryptic verses, the treatise shows how the mind enters into a state of confusion and how this process can be reversed through a fundamental transformation of the mind. At the root of the confusion is a deeply ingrained tendency to believe that the external objects that populate our experience exist independent of our consciousness. This reified split between subject and object sets off a chain reaction of confusion and then thereby destructive emotions, a process that perpetuates the cycle of suffering. Inquiring into the nature of this apparently dualist experience, however, allows us to see that this is in fact a false distinction. At the core of Maitreya's message is the insight that this basic error of perception can be reversed by learning to see things as they are, rather than the distorting lens of dualistic perception. We have two commentaries by Khenpo Shenga and Ju Mipom. Khenpo Shenga is a famous Khenpo in the Nyingma tradition and took upon himself to write commentaries on the 13 main texts of the Shedra tradition in the Nyingma tradition and of the really of the Sakya Nyingma, I believe. They expanded the 5 core texts to include the remaining texts of the 5 dharmas of Maitreya. They add texts by Nagarjuna, the Mula Madhyamaka Karikas. They add Shatarakshitas, Madhyamaka Alamkara, and 2 texts by Asanga, his 400 verses, and there was something else I can't remember, along with the original 5 texts of the core tradition, which are the Vinaya Sutra by Gunaprabha, and they add to that a commentary on that text by Shakya Prabha. I may have that reversed. And then there's in the Madhyamaka, the Abhidharma Kosha is in the 5 core texts, and in the expanded list of 13 they add Sanga's Abhidharma Samuchaya. And then in the Pramana section, the 5 core texts includes the Pramana Vartika of Dharmakirti. And I think they add the Pramana Vinischaya, which is a summary of that text, also by Dharmakirti. And then in the view section, they add the remainder of the 5 texts of Maitreya. And then there's the path, which is Maitreya's text, the ornament of higher realization. Anyway, Khenpo Shenga took about to write commentaries on these texts to focus the Nyingma tradition, the Shedra tradition, and the Nyingma school on these core texts of the Indian tradition by using solely the words of Vasubandhu's commentaries on these texts in his commentary, sort of picking and choosing key explanatory comments by Vasubandhu on the core texts. So his commentary by Khenpo Shenga is very short and comes right after the root text. You see on the bottom of page Roman numeral 13, you see the order of presentation of the root text is bolded and indented, and then the commentary, or here called annotations by Khenpo Shenga, is also indented, and some of the words are bolded, which are words that he picks up from the root text, and then adds commenting words from Vasubandhu, and then the remainder, not indented, is the commentary by Mipam Rinpoche, who apparently gives wonderful explanations of the difficult points. The introduction describes the creation of the book, historically, and thanking those involved and those who helped fund it. And that's it. And so the Dharma Chakra Translation Committee, Cortland Dahl, now famous for his work in Mingyur Rinpoche's Sangha, one of two main teachers, along with Mingyur Rinpoche and Tim Olmsted, two supporting teachers too. Mingyur Rinpoche and Thomas Doctor and a few others. And they they committed to translate all of these 13 texts of the tradition with Khenpo Shenga's commentary, and then they got waylaid by Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche's 84,000 project, where he got all of his Tibetan buddies to agree that they should focus on the sutras and not on the shastras. Maitreya's text being classified as shastras. And finally, the text itself, Maitreya's distinguishing phenomena from their intrinsic nature. And we see the up top, the text title in stylized way of writing Sanskrit characters. Underneath that, we see the Tibetan, the name of the Tibetan for the root text, and then the Tibetan, presumably, for the commentaries. And then the actual text begins on the next page. Well, so these are commentaries. The commentators include commentary before the text begins. They have like a little introduction, preface, right? So it seems like Mipam's commentary starts. So this would be Mipam speaking on text page 3 that has no number on it, but can be deduced by turning the page and discovering page 4 and subtracting 1, turning back words in the book. The Vajra of your non-conceptual wakefulness completely destroyed the mountains of apprehended and apprehender. What great term, apprehended and apprehender. It's got to be like a Halloween movie someday about these two characters. Bringing the attainment of the inconceivable body of wakefulness, Supreme Teacher Shakyamuni, to you I bow down. Heir to the victorious ones, Manjushri, holder of the treasury of profound and vast Dharma, along with the regent Maitreya, master of the 10th ground, the nails of your toes I take as my crown jewels. What a poetic and weird image that is. But the traditional image, the traditional language and phraseology that's often seen is, I place the lotus petals of your feet on the top of my head, or I receive the lotus petals or your lotus-like feet on top of my head, which is the ultimate sign of respect in the Indian tradition, because the feet are considered the lowest part of the body and therefore the most undesirable. And so to lower yourself to placing someone's feet on your head means that you take their lowest part as being above your highest part. In other words, deep respect and honor and veneration. But the crown jewels, of the 5 Buddhas, and so his toenails are the jewels. That's cute. I wonder, so they are painted toenails. They would have to be painted the colors of the jewels, right? So it's toenails. He had toenail polish. Here I shall explain the great treatise that elucidates the profound reality of non-conceptual wakefulness, the essence of all the treasuries of the great vehicle's teachings, which reminds me that I skipped, I'm very sorry, a very interesting part of the introduction, which is, we've touched on it before, but this 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 statement that this text was hidden for many years because it was so advanced. Anyway, we've seen that before. That Maitreya authors this text with the Sangha somewhere like in about the 3rd or 4th century of the Common Era, and then this text disappears for a number of centuries and is rediscovered by Maitripa in like the 10th or 11th century, hidden in the pillar of some monastery that he's visiting. The noble Bodhisattva, back to our text on page 3, the noble Bodhisattva Sangha performed the practice of Lord Maitreya for 12 human years before meeting Maitreya face to face. Now, the practice of Maitreya, that would be like today we would say like a Guru Yoga of Maitreya or a sadhana of Maitreya. But, we don't really have any sadhanas or Guru Yoga or texts of this nature that survive from that period. The text that we see today, like we all are familiar with the Sadhana Mahamudra, which is basically a text of performing the practice of Dorje Trollo Padmakara, the combined embodiment of Dorje Trollo, and Karma Pakshi, the second Karma. And we have a liturgy that describes that process, but we don't really have any liturgies of that nature from this time period. So it'd be sort of interesting to think of what that practice might have looked like. Anyway, he meets Maitreya, leading him to the heavenly realm of Tushita. Maitreya presented a Sangha with 5 teachings that expound upon the intent of all the words of the victorious ones. These 5 teachings are the 2 ornaments, the 2 treatises that distinguish, and the supreme continuity, which we should all be at least vaguely familiar with at this point, having gone through weeks of reading about these 5 treasures. So the 2 ornaments are the first ornament of the Mahayana Sutras. In Sanskrit, Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. Alamkara is ornament. And then we have the ornament of higher realization, which sets out the Bodhisattva path, condensing the great sutra of the perfection of wisdom into a very concise text of, in Sanskrit, the Abhisamaya, higher realization in this case, higher Samaya realization, and then Alamkara, Abhisamaya Alamkara, and the 2 treatises that distinguish. One is the one we hold in our hands, distinguishing Dharma and their essence, and the other is distinguishing the middle from extremes. Madhyanta is middle, Madhya is middle, Anta is extreme, so Madhya Anta, 2 different words that are contracted into Madhyanta, Madhyanta, Vibhanga is distinguishing, and then the supreme continuity, the Uttara Tantra. Some individuals hold these 5 to be single treatise. It's interesting. Others refute the notion that these 5 works form the body of one scripture by showing that their teachings are incompatible with one another in the final analysis, demonstrating, for example, that they include varying positions concerning whether there is only 1 vehicle or 3 vehicles in terms of the definitive meaning. So, interestingly, the text, as he points out, span the gamut, so to speak, of presenting there being 3 paths of Shravaka, Pratyeka, and Buddha, Bodhisattva, Yanas, and then on the other hand, presenting there's 1 path. So the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, which summarizes the Mahayana Sutras, takes excerpts from numerous Mahayana Sutras and arranges them topically, presents there being 3 vehicles, as does a number of the 5 texts, whereas the Uttara Tantra says there's really just 1 vehicle. All sentient beings will become Buddha. They will all enter the Bodhisattva path and become Buddhas. For this reason, they hold that each treatise has its own approach and is a commentary on a distinct teaching of the Buddha. Some, for instance, hold that the first and last treatises listed above, so that would be the first, well, one of the two ornaments. Last treatises listed above. So the last one is the Uttara Tantra. So he's saying that the Abhisamaya Alamkara and the Uttara Tantra explain the middle way thought, Madhyamaka, while the remaining three pertain to the mind-only school. And this is the controversy in Tibet, where certain traditions view some of the Maitreya's teachings as being Chittamatra, in particular Gelugpas, view things this way. Others hold that only the ornament of the sutras is a mind-only scripture, and that the remaining four are all Madhyamaka. Yet another position holds that only the ornament of manifest realization is a Madhyamaka treatise, while the other four are works of the mind-only school. There are also those who believe that all five are in line with mind-only thought, some who believe just the opposite, and so on. There's a lot of different views. In actuality, however, it is indisputable that the ornament of manifest realization comments on the thought of the transcendent insight, the Prajnaparamita, the middle teaching of the Buddha, in terms of the three turnings of the wheel of the Dharma, the second one, and that the supreme continuity, Uttara Tantra, comments on the thought of the definitive meaning of the final wheel of Dharma, showing, Mipam states that the final wheel is definitive, showing that that's his view, that the third turning is incremental when compared to the second turning, whereas most Gelugpas would say that the second turning is the final wheel, the highest presentation, and the third wheel is sort of backtracking. Let's see. The Supreme Continuity comments on the third final wheel of turning of the Dharma, the Sutras on Buddha nature. Both of these treatises hold that there is but one family and one vehicle in the final analysis, the Buddhayana, a view that is in line with the thought of the middle way. The ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, on the other hand, explains the thought of most of those sutras not addressed by the aforementioned two scriptures, doing so in a single presentation. So it presents a sort of wide variety of sutras other than the ones just mentioned. It is clear that for the most part this treatise highlights the thought of middle mind-only sutras, in that it does not treat the accounts of the single class and the single vehicle as definitive, for example. So this statement, it does not treat the accounts of the single class and the single vehicle as definitive, for example. So we know what the vehicles are: Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, and Buddha or Bodhisattva. The class is, there's a presentation in the Lankavatara Sutra of there being 5 classes of individuals, using class as a translation of the Sanskrit term Gotra, which is different than Garba. The idea is that all beings possess Buddha Garba, Tathagata Garba, but in relation to their potential to reveal or actualize, or using the terminology of this text, fundamentally change the status of their Buddha nature. There's 5 different types of beings, which are the Shravaka, Pratyeka, and Bodhisattva, are 3 of them, and then there's what's called the doubtful class, beings that it's uncertain what jhana they will end up in. And then there's the cutoff family, which are those who will not develop any Buddha path. And so the early Mahayana had this sort of negative view of the fate of sentient beings, that some beings, they're just not connected to the Buddha Dharma, and they will not connect to the Buddha Dharma. And then later texts changed that view or corrected it, saying they're all going to become Buddhas. Anyway, this is sort of pedantic. The two treatises that distinguish teach on the vast and profound aspects of the great vehicle in general, though they do indeed offer extensive presentations of the principle of the three natures. So the three natures are this unique way of looking at the nature of reality as having three shades instead of there being the common version of two truths. The Madhyamaka tradition, presumably Nagarjuna being the first to codify the two truths. Who would that be? Would they be in the Prajnaparamita Sutras? I don't know. It's interesting. Probably in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, you have the two truths: the relative truth and the ultimate truth, or the relative nature or level of existence or conventional existence, and the ultimate or absolute level of existence. And then in the Yogacara tradition, we have this thing called the three natures, where reality has three aspects to it. There's imagination that conceptual mind has about the nature of reality, which is all imaginary, thinking that there's people and trees and cars and time and space and phenomena and lunch and things like that. And then there's so all of that is imaginary. And then there's the dependent nature, which is the continuum of the Alaya Vijnana that manifests or is subject to cause and effect, dependent upon cause and effect, interdependent origination, and that constantly changes based on causes and conditions, and it is not determined to be one thing or another. It has no true nature as being this or that, but it continually morphs into the variety of appearances, changing over time. And then there's the completely perfected nature, which is the emptiness of all phenomena. So these two texts do teach on the three natures, whereas the Abhisamaya Alamkara does not. And these texts teach on how external objects do not exist, mind only. This alone does not warrant their categorization as exclusively mind-only scriptures. Just the fact that they talk about these two does not mean they're mind-only scriptures, according to Mipam. Indeed, there's no conflict in using the Dharma terminology employed in these works to present the thought of the middle way, Madhyamaka, as well. This sort of a radical view where most Tibetans, Gelupas, Sakyapas, some Kagyapas, view texts that talk about the three natures and mind only as being mind only scriptures and not Madhyamaka scriptures. And then certain radical individuals like Dolpopa of the early Jonangpa teacher, the Buddha from Dolpo, most famous one that comes up with Zhentong, makes the Zhentong tradition famous. He says, all of these texts by Maitreya are Madhyamaka, and that true Madhyamaka includes mind only, the idea of mind only, or mere cognition, as Karl Brunholzer calls it, and the three natures. That true Madhyamaka includes that. And that if you define Madhyamaka as not including those, then your understanding of Madhyamaka is wrong. On this point, the Sutra of the Journey to Lanka Avatara Sutra says the five principles and three natures, along with the eight collections of consciousness and the twofold absence of self, the entirety of the great vehicle is subsumed in these. So the scriptural quotation is meant to show that the Buddha himself speaking in what is recorded on CD or cassette tape as being the Lanka Avatara Sutra said that the three natures are the summary, along with those other aspects, are the summary of the Mahayana. And the five principles is a way of summing up the Mahayana. I can't really remember what they are, but they're things like the skandha. It's sort of like an expanded list of the three skills that you find in the Abhidharma, which are skandhas, ayatanas, and dhatus. And it's expanded to, I think, include suchness and maybe the Ali Vijnana, I'm not sure. I can't remember the five dharmas in the Lankavatara. This is also evidenced by the fact that, so after the quote, hence such terminology is used to encompass the entirety of the great vehicle. This is also evidenced by the fact that the terminology associated with the three essential natures is found in the sutra requested by Maitreya, a scripture that elucidates the thought of the mother, which is the way many Tibetans refer to the Prajnaparamita scriptures as the mother, the great mother, the transcendent mother. Prajnaparamita is viewed as the mother of all the Buddhas, and so they call the Prajnaparamita the great mother, or the mother, and the sutras they call as the mother as well. And so there's a Prajnaparamita Sutra called the Prajnaparamita Sutra requested by Maitreya, which indeed mentions the three natures. So they point to that as saying, look, it's in there. It's in your own sutras. How can you say it's not part of the Madhyamaka if it's in your Prajnaparamita sutras? Moreover, we do not find any statements or reasonings that would necessitate accepting the position that non-dual consciousness is truly established. So this is the main critique of the mind-only school, is that according to some proponents of the Madhyamaka tradition, they say that the mind-only school or texts put forward the notion that non-dual consciousness, big mind, mind with a capital M, is truly established in terms of the scheme of the three natures of imaginary, dependent, and completely perfected. They say that the mind is the nature of the completely perfected. The completely perfected nature is the true nature of the mind. And that the mind, non-dual mind, is truly established. And Mipam and other scholars of the alternative traditions say there's no support for that assumption in the early texts of this tradition. In the texts of Asanga and Maitreya, nowhere do they say that non-dual consciousness is truly established. There are texts by people that come after them who create what then leads to the inappropriate appellation of mind only to the Maitreya and Asanga texts. There are people who come later and talk about mind as being truly established. And they give Maitreya and Asanga a bad name and lead to this assertion, which is, there's no basis for. For this reason, not only is there no problem whatsoever in explaining these texts to be impartial commentaries on the thought of the great vehicle, in general, this is actually reflected in their structure. So he says, in the thought of the great vehicle in general, so the middle way of the Mahayana in general, hence distinguishing the middle from extremes, is a scripture that elucidates the principles of the vast path of the three vehicles. All distinguishing phenomena from their intrinsic nature is a scripture that enables one to ascertain non-conceptual wakefulness. or wisdom, the essential subject matter of all the profound collections of sutras, in harmony with the union of the two truths, as taught in the Middle Way school of yogic practice. So, um, this text, distinguishing phenomena from their intrinsic nature, is a scripture that enables one to ascertain or understand non-conceptual wisdom, wakefulness, which is the fundamental focus of all sutras and is in harmony with the union of the two truths, as is taught in a subdivision of the Madhyamaka tradition called the Middle Way, the Madhyamaka Yogacara school, which is a blending of Madhyamaka and Yogacara, uh, most famously presented by Shantarakshita in his ornament of Madhyamaka. For this reason, also due to their extreme profundity, both this scripture and the supreme continuity were bound with a seal of secrecy, here it is, and eventually were no longer extant in India. Later, the master Maitripa observed light emerging from the crack in a stupa, whereupon he extracted the manuscripts of this text and the Uttara Tantra. These two works then flourished once again when Lotsawa means translator, not sure what Shama means, but the translator, Sangye Jeltsin, requested to translate this scripture. His Pandita, the teacher who he was working with to translate the sutra, just like the Nalanda Translation Committee worked with Trungpa Rinpoche to translate texts. That tradition of translators working with a scholar, a realized scholar, goes back to the earliest period of translations in the Tibetan tradition. So his Pandita stressed its importance, the importance of this text, giving him one page at a time with the words, "Do not let this work go to waste. Due to its strict seal, this is a rare scripture. If it were to disappear, it would be as though the Lord Maitreya had passed away from Jambudvipa." And Jambudvipa is the name of the world as we know it in the Buddhist cosmology system. It's called the Southern Continent, and they viewed the Earth, what we call the Earth, as being the Southern Continent, Jambudvipa. And it means the rose apple continent, a certain type of tree, jambu tree. That apparently was common in India, I guess. As alluded to here, the profound reality taught by this text is the definitive secret of this view. So this text is held in very high regard, since it is necessary for all practitioners of the great vehicle to realize this view. There is nothing inappropriate in explaining this scripture from the perspective of either the Middle Way or the Mind-Only school. Despite the fact that masters of both the Middle Way and Mind-Only traditions have explained them to be texts that explicate their own respective positions, the intent of the sutras on transcendent insight, Prajnaparamita, is that of the Middle Way. In the same way, there are those who believe that this treatise teaches the view of mind only, and insofar as such individuals are operating according to their own intellectual capacity, there's no contradiction in that. This idea that teachings apply to sentient beings on different stages of their path of development. And so there's some individuals are on a certain stage where the mind-only view is helpful for them, while others are in a certain stage where the more traditional Madhyamaka tradition way of understanding the Mahayana is more appropriate to them. In actuality, however, this scripture offers a precise and explicit presentation of non-conceptual wakefulness, the ultimate profound meaning of the great vehicle. In this sense, it is a general commentary on the entire range of profound sutras. In other words, all sutras, the Buddha said this, all sutras, all dharma has one sound, one taste, the taste of the wisdom that understands the absence of self. I.e., in the sort of, that was an early statement of the Buddha, where he said all teachings, all dharmas, all true dharma has one flavor, and that's comparable in the Mahayana tradition to saying the wisdom, the non-conceptual wisdom that understands the true nature of realities being beyond this or that. While its position on relative subjects is in harmony with mind only, this work's assertions concerning the ultimate, the inherent nature, are in line with the middle way. And that's the system of the Madhyamaka Yogacara combination, is that the relative is understood from the point of view of the middle way, the mind only tradition, and the ultimate is understood from the point of view of the traditional Madhyamaka tradition. Thus, in the final analysis, its intent is that of the middle way, yet it uses the principle of the union of the middle way in mind only to teach the vital points of the view of the great vehicle. And that is what comes down to us as the Yogacara tradition. The Yogacara tradition views the relative in the way that the mind only school talks about the relative, in terms of the entire world as being a projection of the Alaya Vijnana in a shared and unshared manner, and that the ultimate reality is as described in the texts of the Prasangika Madhyamakas, such as Chandrakirti, Buddhapalita, and Nagarjuna. When understood and explained in this manner, the full import of this great treatise will have been thoroughly elucidated. This great treatise can be explained in 4 sections. This is the traditional way of dividing up a text, 4 sections as if they're equivalent. The meaning of the title, the translator's homage, the meaning of the scripture, and the meaning of the conclusion. So the whole text is really in point 3. The title in the Indian language, so the language of India. Now, Sanskrit was not a universal language of India, by the way. It was the language of the educated elite in India, which initially were Brahmin priests, and then gradually other religious traditions, elite, would study Sanskrit. And so the Buddha did not speak in Sanskrit, and the early texts were not written in Sanskrit, but it was a project that happened later on of recording the Buddha Dharma in Sanskrit. But today, from the Tibetan's point of view, the Indian language was Sanskrit. Dharma, Dharmatava, Banga, Karika. Karika means stanzas. In the Tibetan language, Chudong, Chuni, Nampar, Jpa, Sikleer, J, Pa. Tibetan pronunciation is difficult and has very little connection to the way it's presented in English letters in the formal transliteration. The first section concerns the meaning of title. When translated in Tibetan, the Sanskrit term dharma becomes phenomena, ch. Dharmata becomes intrinsic nature, ch, ni. So the term ni makes it into like thus or such, or ness, N-E-S-S in English. So we have like empty, shunya, and shunyata would be tongpa, empty, and tongpa ni, emptiness. Anyway, Vabhanga becomes distinguishing number Jepa, and Karika becomes presented in stanzas, Tsikli or Yepa, Jepa. Hence, the title indicates that this treatise accurately depicts the character, phenomena, and their intrinsic nature. In other words, it delineates cyclic existence, samsara, and the transcendence of suffering, nirvana, distinguishing them from one another in a precise manner. The translator's homage. And at the end of the text, we learn who the translator is. Let's just peek and see who this translator is who's paying homage. Um, so on page 68, just quickly skipping ahead, given our time, the colophons of the author and translators. This completes the stanzas of distinguishing phenomena of intrinsic nature composed by the protector Maitreya. Not convinced he would have used that colophon for himself. But anyway, the translation was prepared, edited, and established by the Kashmiri preceptor Mahajana. So that was the Pandita and the Lotsawa of Shama, the monk Senge Gyaltsen. We just saw that. Back to page 7, homage to the protector Maitreya. The translators began their project to translate this text by showing respect via, which is a funny word to use in English for a translation, but via the three gates, stating, we pay homage to the author of this very text, the great Bodhisattva and protector of all beings, Maitreya, who currently resides in Chushita and is referred to as such because he possesses great love. Maitreya has been known by this name from the time he became a bodhisattva, will continue to be until he attains Buddhahood, from which he is separated only by only a single birth. The implication there is that will continue to be until he attains Buddhahood. It implies that maybe his name will change when he becomes a Buddha, but I don't know about that. But the idea is that he did become a bodhisattva at some time in the past. He's like a regular guy or woman, just like the rest of us. The meaning of the scripture is discussed in two sections: the stanza that relates to the composition of the treatise and everything else. The composition of the treatise on the topic, the treatise states, something is to be understood and entirely relinquished, while something else is to be directly perceived. Hence, this treatise has been composed with the wish to distinguish the characteristics of these. What is it that's to be understood and entirely relinquished? It's samsara, and what is to be directly perceived is the true nature. So the first is dharma and then dharmata. So that is Maitreya's root verse, conveyed to us via a sangha, to use the translator's technical term, via. And then we have Khenpo Shenga's arrangement of Vasubandhu's commentary, something, meaning the phenomena that are the factors of thorough affliction, is to be understood and entirely relinquished, while something else, meaning the intrinsic nature, that is distinguished with reference to a fundamental transformation characterized by complete purification, is to be directly perceived. Hence, this treatise has been composed with the wish to distinguish the characteristics of these two. Thus, it is implied that this is not a distinction made between different objects, but objects and their essence. That's something that is, so page 8, that is to be understood and entirely relinquished cyclic existence, samsara, while the something else that is to be actualized is the transcendence of suffering, nirvana, because all entities that are known and either relinquished or pursued by beings fall into one of these two categories. The noble Maitreya states, this great treatise has been composed with vast insight and compassion, with the wish to distinguish precisely and unerringly the characteristics of cyclic existence from those of the transcendence of samsara. Nirvana is translated in Tibetan as passing beyond suffering, transcendence of suffering. The actual body of the treatise. Second, the body of the treatise is discussed in 3 sections: a brief presentation, a detailed explanation, and a concluding summary that uses metaphors to illustrate the principles outlined in the text. The brief presentation. The first section is further divided into 4 parts: an identification of the essence of samsara and nirvana, individual explanations of their respective characteristics. Third, the underlying rationale for these characteristics. or sort of like the underlying rationale for these characterizations and for an investigation into whether these two are the same or different. The essence of cyclic existence and the transcendence of suffering, the first part of the first topic, the treatise states, all of these are summarized. Sorry, if all of these are summarized, they can be understood to be twofold, because everything is included in phenomena and their intrinsic nature. That which is classified as phenomena is cyclic existence, whereas the intrinsic nature is classified as the transcendence of suffering of the three vehicles. One may wonder whether or not this is nothing more than a discussion of the distinctions between phenomena and their intrinsic nature, or whether these two are all that there is. This is not a twofold distinction that is made in isolation from the multiplicity of things. For the transcendent conqueror has employed classifications in terms of aggregates and so forth. If all of these classifications are summarized, they can be understood to be twofold, because everything is included in the phenomena that are characterized by thorough affliction and their intrinsic nature, which is characterized by fundamental transformation. It may be said, through this we will not know the distinction between that which constitutes cyclic existence and that which constitutes the transcendence of suffering. So that's an objection, and then the response is, in response it is said, that which is classified as phenomena is cyclic existence, whereas the intrinsic nature is classified as the transcendence of suffering of the three vehicles. The three vehicles leading to that. When all of the topics contained in the Buddha's sublime words are summarized, they can be understood to be twofold. Two things the Buddha talked about in great variety. Everything, meaning all that can be known, is subsumed by phenomena and their essence, their intrinsic nature. If these two are thoroughly understood, one will no longer remain ignorant regarding any of the topics contained in the Buddha's sublime words. In this context, that which is classified as phenomena is cyclic existence in the sense of the dualistic perception of apprehended and apprehender. The reason is that this encompasses all the phenomena that appear to delusion. It is the nature of these phenomena that is to be known by those who seek liberation and omniscience. They function as the basis for the process of relinquishment carried out by those same individuals. That which is classified as the intrinsic nature, on the other hand, is the transcendence of suffering of the three vehicles. All that is to be genuinely understood and actualized comes down to this. By virtue of seeing that there are no essences in terms of personal selves or phenomena within cyclic existence, regardless of how things may appear, a transcendence of suffering is achieved that involves a fundamental transformation. Since here one has genuinely accessed the way things are, there is no discrepancy between the way things appear and the way they are. So let's pause there for tonight. Page 10. And what follows is he's going to give a little bit of a sort of a summary presentation of the essence of the two, the Dharma and Dharmata, and then the rationale for that characterization, and then asking and addressing the question of, are they the same or different? And then we launch in detailed presentations, into detailed presentations of both, and then a detailed presentation of the fundamental transformation. Comments, suggestions, questions, announcements, thoughts, anything? Okay. Speechless.
Oh,
That's
actually, it was this is just a random thing that in an email that I got today from Rangjung Yeshe, they were listing out their graduations and things, and they listed the theses subjects of their graduates, and one of them was called the fertility of delusion, exploring the potential for collective liberation through overlapping frameworks of transformation found in the Dharma Dharmata Vibhaga
That's
and
quite a
emergent strategy.
mouthful. And
Yeah, so
emergent
anyway,
strategies.
and I'm sorry, and emergent
Wow.
strategy. I guess that's another text. I don't know.
Oh,
Anyway, I just thought it was just a funny thing that people actually read this and write their theses on it.
yeah, yeah. You saw in the introduction, John Donne did that as well.
Oh, was he also okay?
Yeah,
Yeah, this guy is probably has not become famous yet, but maybe there's
yeah. What's his
that's
name, this guy?
Andrew John Bishop.
Cool.
So just
Neat.
random note, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, let's conclude with our um, little stanza. Where are we? Chants. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled, may all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Nice to see
you.
you.
Thank
Stay warm.
Thank you.
Don't get a cold this time of year. The change.
Bye. Thank
See you
you.
yeah,
soon. Take
thank
care.
you.
Bye.